I want to read a bit of Chinese fox folklore. This is from a book from 1876 called Folklore of China. Actually, the full title is Folklore of China and its Affinities with that of the Aryan and Semitic races. Quote, "But of all known animals, the fox plays the principal part in Chinese demonology. European folklore assigns a prominent place to the werewolves, which are even now believed by the superstitious peasantry of many countries to haunt their native forests. Well, in China, we find the same idea in a slightly different form. The fox takes the place of the wolf, and fairy foxes play an important part in every native collection of supernatural tales. The belief in their existence dates from remote antiquity, though more prevalent in northern than in southern China. There is, however, this difference between the werewolf and the fairy fox, that whereas the former is invariably malicious, the latter may be either beneficent or malignant. In many of the tales, the fox is only transformed, as in the well-known nursery story of Beauty and the Beast, into human shape after making acquaintance with its host. At the age of 50, the fox can take the form of a woman, and at that of 100, it can assume the appearance of a young and beautiful girl. When 1,000 years old, he is admitted to the heavens and becomes the celestial fox." The Liao Chai Chi Yi, a collection of tales published in 1765, abounds with narrations of this nature, many of the most curious, unfortunately, being unsuitable for publication in an English dress. I love that. Moving on. Like most Western nations, the Chinese ascribe to the fox a cunning, crafty disposition by which he can disarm suspicion on the part of the very animals which constitute his prey. The notion about the fox's caution is put to practical use in the north of China, for it has been observed that when he is crossing a frozen river or lake, he advances very slowly and deliberately, putting his head down close to the ice and listening for the sound of water. Accordingly, when in the early spring the traveler fears the stability of the ice, if he observes on its surface traces of the fox's footsteps, he may proceed without apprehension. One can easily see what an opportunity is presented here again to the Chinese mind for the exercise of myth-making ingenuity. Below the ice is the region of the yin. Above the ice is the region of the yang. Accordingly, it has come to pass that the fox is represented as living on the debatable land which is neither the earth of life nor the Hades of death. His dwelling place on the earth is among the tombs, or actually, rather, within the tomb, and the spirits of the deceased often occupy the body. Thus he enables ghosts of the dead to return to life, or himself performs their terrible behest, visiting upon living men and women the iniquities they have committed against those now dead, and by this means bringing peace and rest to the souls of the latter, which would else be traveling and troubling forever. It is as a pretty girl that the fox appears most frequently and does most mischief. Disguised as a woman, it is always young and handsome, generally wicked, but on rare occasions very good. At times it puts on the garb and appearance of someone well known, but who is either dead or at a great distance. An accomplished scholar who resides in a village about 20 miles from Fuchao told me not long ago a story which affords an illustration of this personation of particular individuals. And yes, the word he used there was personation, not impersonation. Love old-time lingo. Back to the story. A friend of his had ill-treated and, as was supposed, secretly killed a pretty young wife and married another. Soon after this latter event, the house was reported to be haunted, and no servant would remain in the family. The first wife's apartments were the worst of all, and this part of the premises had to be abandoned. Now one day my friend was reading with the master of the house, and they came to a passage which treats of ghosts and spirits. They then ceased reading and entered into a conversation on the subject, and the story of the haunted chambers was related. My friend laughed at and reproached the weakness which made a scholar believe in ghosts, and finally the two agreed to remove to that portion of the dreadful rooms. Before they had been seated here a long time, strange sounds became audible, and soon the pit-pat of a woman's steps was heard. The door opened without any noise, and in walked the murdered woman, clothed as of old. The blood forsook the two men's faces, speech fled their lips, and had it not been for the law of gravity, their pigtails would have stood on end. There they sat paralyzed with mute awe and gazing on the spectre, which went pit-pat over the boards, looking neither to right nor left until it reached the corner, in which was a small wash-hand stand with a basin of water. She took the basin in her hand and walked steadily with it over to the man who had been her husband, presenting it to him, when he instantly uttered a terrible scream and fell backwards. Then the spectral woman walked away, and her patter was heard along the boards until she reached the outer door. My friend summoned up courage to go out and make investigation, but no human creatures had been stirring, and only the fox, which came almost daily, had been seen on the premises. The house has been abandoned. The owner has gone elsewhere, but my friend believes that the ghost of the murderer's wife will torment him by means of a fox daily until it brings him to the grave. The end. Pretty awesome on several fronts. Yeah, the fox is definitely a notable character in, the folklore of Far East Asia, just as he or she is the world over, but it's definitely a different tone, and there's different aspects that you don't see in the West. In the West, it's, Europe, etc., it's pretty much almost always the cunning and the greed, but in China and Japan and elsewhere in that part of the world, you have a strong supernatural component. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that, but this video was made specifically for Robert Lovgren, sorry, I'm sure I mispronounced your name, from Sweden. Deeply appreciate your support, Robert, in helping me make the Fox and Global Folktales. Goodbye.